Hello students, welcome to the 10th standard social science class. Hope you all are reading well at home and completing your homeworks in time. So today we are going to learn about the lesson Forests and Wildlife Resources from Geography. I know that this is the second part. Before starting the class, I want you to get ready with a pen and a book to jot down the important points. So are you ready, children? So before starting this particular class, I want to brief you about what we learned in the previous class. So do you know that over half of India's natural forests are gone? 1/3 of its wetlands drained out, 70% of its surface water bodies polluted, 40% of its mangroves wiped out, and with continued hunting and trade of wild animals and commercially valuable plants, thousands of plant and animal species are heading towards extinction. So the question today is, how can we conserve these resources and why should we conserve these resources? We are going to learn these in the next slides. So have you noticed any activity which leads to a loss of biodiversity around you? Yes, there are many, like cutting down trees, killing wild animals and many things. So there would be many measures to actually save these. So the destruction of forests and wildlife is not just a biological issue. The biological loss is strongly correlated with the loss of cultural diversity. Such losses have increasingly marginalized and impoverished many indigenous and other forest-dependent communities who directly depend on various components of the forest and wildlife for food, drink, medicine, culture, spirituality, etc. Within the poor, women are more affected more than the men. Let us see how. Here is a small example, children. In many societies, women bear the major responsibility of collection of fuel, fodder, water and other basic subsistence needs. As these resources are depleted, the drudgery of women increases and sometimes they have to walk for more than 10 kilometers to collect these resources. This causes serious health problems for women and negligence of home and children because of the increased hours of work, which often has serious social implications. The indirect impact of degradation such as severe drought or deforestation induced floods, etc. also hits the poor the hardest. Poverty in these cases is a direct outcome of environmental destruction, okay? Therefore, forest and wildlife are vital to the quality of life and environment in the subcontinent. It is imperative to adapt to sound forest and wildlife conservation strategies. Now the question arises, why should we conserve the forests? Conservation preserves the ecological diversity and our life support systems, which are water, air and soil. It also preserves the genetic diversity of plants and animals for better growth of species and breeding. So these are the reasons as to why we need to conserve our forests and wildlife. So conservation of forest and wildlife in India. So we are going to see conservation of forests and wildlife in India. So conservation is the background of rapid decline in wildlife population and forestry has become essential. But why do we need to conserve our forests and wildlife? Conservation, as I told you, it preserves the ecological diversity and our life support systems. Let us take an example over here. In agriculture, we are still dependent on traditional crop varieties. Fisheries too are heavily dependent on maintenance of aquatic biodiversity. In the 1960s and 1970s, the conservationists demanded a national wildlife protection program. The Indian Wildlife Protection Act was implemented in 1972 with various provisions for protecting habitats. An all India list of protected species was also published. The thrust of the program was towards protecting the remaining population of certain endangered species. How? By banning hunting, giving legal protection to their habitats, and restricting trade in wildlife. So these were three main points. Okay? The first one is what? Protecting by banning hunting, giving legal protection to their habitats, and restricting trade in wildlife. So subsequently what happened? Central and many state governments established national parks and wildlife sanctuaries, about which we have already studied. The central government also announced several projects for protecting specific animals which were gravely threatened, including the tiger, the one-horned rhinoceros, the Kashmir stag or hangul, three types of crocodile, freshwater crocodile, saltwater crocodile, and the gharial, the Asiatic lion, and others too. Most recently, the Indian elephant, the black buck, which is even called chinkara, the great Indian bustard or the godawan, and the snow leopard, etc., have been given full or partial legal protection against hunting and trade throughout India. So let us see in points here again, the same thing what I told you. So these are the important points here. The Wildlife Protection Act was implemented in 1972. The aim of the program was towards protecting the remaining population of certain endangered species by banning hunting, giving legal protection to their habitats, and restricting trade in wildlife. Central and state governments established national parks and wildlife sanctuaries. The central government also announced several projects for protecting specific animals which were gravely threatened, including the tiger. So the government has taken many steps to actually conserve the forests. So what it did, we are going to see now. So government actually categorized the forests. Okay, we are going to see how the government has categorized the forests. So types and distribution of forests and wildlife resources in India. Even if we want to conserve our vast forests and wildlife resources, it is rather difficult to manage and control and regulate them. In India, much of its forests and wildlife resources are either owned or managed by the government through the forest department or other government departments. These are classified, the forests are classified like this. Reserved forests. More than half of the total forest land has been declared reserved forests. Reserved forests are regarded as the most valuable as far as conservation of forest and wildlife resources are concerned. Protected forests. Almost 1/3 of the total forest area is protected forest as declared by the forest department. This forest land is protected from other or any other depletion too. Unclassed forests. These are other forests and wastelands belonging to both government and private individuals and communities. So we have something called as unclassed forests also. So these are the forests and wastelands belonging to both government and private individuals and communities. So reserved and protected forests are also referred to as permanent forest estates maintained for the purpose of producing timber and other forest produce. And for protective reasons, Madhya Pradesh has the largest area under permanent forests, constituting 75% of its total forest area. Jammu and Kashmir, Andhra Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, West Bengal and Maharashtra have large percentages of reserved forests of its total forest areas. Whereas Bihar, Haryana, Punjab, Himachal Pradesh, Odisha and Rajasthan have a bulk of it under protected forests. All northeastern states and parts of Gujarat have a very high percentage of their forests as unclassed forests managed by local communities. So that is about categorization of forests so that they can protect the forests. So we are going to see community and conservation now. So conservation strategies are not new in our country. We often ignore that in India, forests are also home to some of the traditional communities. In some areas of India, local communities are struggling a lot to conserve these habitats along with government officials, recognizing that only this will secure their own long-term livelihood. In Sariska Tiger Reserve, Rajasthan, villagers have fought against mining by citing the Wildlife Protection Act. In many areas, villagers themselves are protecting habitats and explicitly rejecting government involvement. The inhabitants of 5 villages in the Alwar district of Rajasthan, let us see what has happened, had declared 1200 hectares of forest as the Bhairodev Dakav Sanctuary, declaring their own set of rules and regulations which do not allow hunting and are protecting the wildlife against any outside encroachments. See the kind of steps the people take. Okay, even the community fights back. We have the sacred groves, a wealth of diverse and rare species. Okay, nature worship is the main thing today. Okay, because even today the tribals worship the nature, especially the forest, the river, the sun. So let us see what the community did for the conservation of wildlife. As I told you, as I studied, I'm giving the bits again. In some areas of India, local communities are struggling to conserve these habitats along with government officials, recognizing that only this will secure their own long-term livelihood. As I told you, in Sariska Tiger Reserve, Rajasthan, villagers fought against mining by citing the Wildlife Protection Act. In many areas, villagers themselves are protecting habitats and explicitly rejecting government involvement. The inhabitants of the 5 villages in the Alwar district of Rajasthan have declared 1200 hectares of forest as the Bhairodev Dakav Sanctuary, declaring their own set of rules and regulations which do not allow hunting and are protecting the wildlife against any outside encroachments. So nature worship, as I told you. So nature worship is an age-old tradition of a country, and it's an old tribal belief based on the premise that all creations of nature have to be protected. Such beliefs have preserved several virgin forests in pristine form called sacred groves, the forests of god and goddesses. These patches of forest or parts of large forests have been left untouched by the local people, and any interference with them is totally banned. Clear? This is totally banned. So let us see about the tribes which live in the forests. The Mundas and the Santal of Chota Nagpur region worship Mahua. It's called as Basya latifolia and Kadamba. Okay? And the tribals of Odisha and Bihar worship the tamarind. Tamarind indica and mango. Okay, these trees are worshipped in Odisha and Bihar during weddings. To many of us, people and banyan trees are considered sacred. Okay? So this is about how we worship the trees in our country. So let us see something about the Indian society. Okay? So Indian society comprises of several cultures, each with its own set of traditional methods of conserving nature and its creations. Sacred qualities are often ascribed to springs, mountain peaks, plants and animals which are closely protected. You will find troops of macaws and langurs around many temples. They are fed daily and are treated as a part of temple devotees. In Nandira, around Bishnoi villages in Rajasthan, herds of black buck, nilgai and peacocks can be seen as an integral part of community and nobody dares to harm them. Okay, so that is about the Indian society. We have many things to learn actually. So we have, as I told you, we have different kinds of different cultures also. Okay, so the famous Chipko movement, which we are going to read now. So the famous Chipko movement in the Himalayas has not only successfully resisted deforestation in several areas, but also has shown that community afforestation with indigenous species can be enormously successful. So this is about the Chipko movement. There are many methods also which are actually started by different communities. So attempts to revive the traditional conservation methods of developing new methods of ecological farming are now widespread. Farmers and citizens groups like the Beach Bachao Andolan in Tehri and Navadhanya have shown that adequate levels of diversified crop production without the use of synthetic chemicals are possible and economically viable. So farmers and citizen groups, as I told you, like the Beach Bachao Andolan in Tehri and Navadhanya have shown that adequate levels of diversified crop production without the use of synthetic chemicals are possible and are economically viable. In India, Joint Forest Management Program, which we call JFM program, furnishes a good example for involving local communities in the management and restoration of degraded forests. The program has been in formal existence since 1988 when the state of Odisha passed the first resolution for joint forest management. JFM depends on the formation of local institutions at a village level that undertake protection activities mostly on degraded forest land managed by the forest department in return. It is actually managed by the forest department. In return, the members of these communities are entitled to intermediary benefits like non-timber forest producers and share in the timber harvested by successful protection. So we have learned many things over here. So let us see what we have learned, we will see. So the tree is a peculiar organism, as I told you, of unlimited kindness and benevolence and makes no demand for its sustenance and extends generously the products of its life activity. It affords protection out to all beings, offering shade even to the axemen who destroy it. So that's what a tree wants to convey to you. Okay, so the clear lesson from the dynamics of both environmental destruction and reconstruction in India is that local communities everywhere have to be involved in some kind of natural management. But there is still a long way to go before local communities are at the center stage in decision making. Accept only those economic or developmental activities that are people centric, environmental friendly and economically rewarding. So, it is our duty to protect the wildlife, I mean to say the fauna and flora of the world, so that it will have the future generation is going to enjoy the fruits what we have planted today. Okay, so all the best children. With this we come to the end of this lesson.